One of the things regarding the schach is the schach, we said, has to come from the ground, gedulim in haaretz, and also another law is that it should not be able to be susceptible to tumah. That means the covering that we use for the sukkah, the schach, is not mekabel tumah. It's not capable of becoming contaminated. That means that if a dead sheret, certain types of teeming objects like a mouse, a dead mouse will come in contact with it, or someone who's tameh, like a nida, would touch it, it will not make it contaminated. Because certain things do not have the ability, it's not susceptible, it doesn't have the ability to receive contamination. That is the cover, that is one of the particular laws that the Torah has regarding the schach, the cover of the sukkah, which most probably has a deeper meaning. That why is it that the schach can't be made out of metal? The cover, right? We're here. We are to commemorate the special. What's the reason why we sit in a sukkah? So the main reason, the Gemara has two approaches, but the halacha seems to follow the approach that there were special clouds of glory, anoni hakavod, that protected the Jewish community when they were in the desert for 40 years. It created a shelter for the Jewish community from the heat of the day of a desert and the coldness of the night, which was a tremendous miracle that we have millions of people, because you have 600,000 men over 20. You have to figure there's 600,000 women over 20. Then you have all the children. So you have a couple of million people living in a desert, all the children, all the babies. To be able to live in such a place was a tremendous miracle, as one of the commentators explained. That's why the Torah elaborates, mentions the Pashas Maseh, the 42 travelings of the Jewish community. They went from here to here and here to here. Why is it so important to tell us they're traveling from this place to that place and that place to that place? So the Rabbeinu Bachai explains, because if you'll ask anybody about these places, they'll tell you these places are impossible for a nation to live in such a place for such a long period of time. And yet the Jewish community, good morning, yet the Jewish community lives in such a place, it's unbelievable. It's not like they were living near shelter land. They were living deep in deserts, deep places. Therefore, it's important to note the names of the 42 places where they lived to recognize the great miracle. So the great miracle, and therefore we're commemorating that by creating some sort of shelter, reminiscent of the shelter that Hashem, God, provided for us in the desert. That is the idea. So if it's the idea of a shelter, and therefore the shelter contains walls, you need to have walls, it has to have a cover. Right? We said you have to have a minimum of 3 walls. And it has to be a certain height, minimum of 10 tefachim, a certain space. Right? And you have to have a covering. You have to have more shade than sun, right? There's another halacha, right? You can't have just a small little amount of schach. You have to have enough schach that's going to create that protection from the sun. So why is it that the schach can't be susceptible to contamination, Adam, right? We said there's a special law that the schach cannot become contaminated. So I would suggest, because we have to understand the schach, many of the commentators explain the schach is like the tzilo de hamnusa, represents the covering of Hashem, God's protection. So with something that represents God's protection, God is pure. And you know, like we say about our neshama that Hashem gives us is pure. We're created pure. So the purity and the holiness of the schach, which represents the sukkah, which represents God's protection, is something that cannot become contaminated. We're talking about it's a holy event, it's a holy shelter that you're making, and the schach is supposed to remind you of Hashem. The Mekama Kabbalah Tumah is a holy idea. What's the significance that the cover, you're making a cover anyways? What's the difference whether the cover is made of material that is capable of becoming contaminated or not capable of contaminated? So I want to suggest, because it has to do with a more deeper idea of what the cover, who the cover is, what the cover represents. If the cover would represent Mickey Mouse, then it won't be a big deal for the cover to be susceptible to contamination. It's Mickey Mouse. But if the cover represents the protection of God, that's a much holier concept. The protection of God, which is represented by the covering, the Succah, so the protection of God has to be something which is not capable of contamination, because it's a holy, it represents a holy idea. Not be able to be contaminated represents a purity, right? If something cannot become contaminated, it means it always remains in the level of purity. And I would like to suggest, because of the, Adam, if you want to send to the group that we're on, thank you. Because of what it represents, what the Succah represents, what the cover represents, meaning the walls, if you have material, you make the walls out of, make metal poles for walls. No problem. You can make metal poles, even though metal poles, let's say, are susceptible to contamination. It's not a problem. But the metal poles don't represent the cover, the protection of Hashem. It's the Succah that represents the cover of Hashem. Even if you look at the letters Succah, Samach is 60, right? And there's an idea of look at the word Sukkah. Sukkah, Samach is 60, Vav is 6, is 66, Chaf is 20, is 86, Hey is 5, is 91. Sukkah, the numerical value of Sukkah is 91. What is the numerical value of Amen? When you say Amen, which is from the language of Emunah, that I believe it's true, Amen is also 91. So Amen and Sukkah are equivalent numerical values, because the Sukkah is the Emunah, in the belief in Hashem represents, and the Sukkah represents the belief in Hashem's protection. And Sukkah, we know, why is it called Sukkah? Why is a Sukkah called Sukkah? What does the word Sukkah have to do with the, why is that the word to refer to this hut? Because Sukkah is because of the Succah. The word Sukkah is because of the Succah, which is the shelter, which is the cover. And that's the essence, that's the main point of the main halachas of the Sukkah. Of course, you have the walls, but the most important, the essence of why it's called the Sukkah, because of the Succah, which is the Succah, which represents the protection of Hashem. So with that backdrop, so we have this law that the Succah cannot be able to become contaminated, which maybe also represents the Jew. We also can't become contaminated. That's in life, that's our mission, not to get contaminated. We leave the house. We leave the house to go to a sukkah, symbolic of the Jew going out to the workplace, going out to the world. But our job is to make sure that we don't get contaminated. We remain pure. So with that, any comment, Mr. Haber? I mean, Hashem asks of us to create a structure with a roof, with a ceiling, with a cover that's not able to become contaminated. The question is, if we want to try to understand what's the meaning for that, that's the law. Law, reason. We could try to understand the reason. The Rambam says it's very important to try to understand, to the best of your ability, what could be the reason why Hashem gave this law, right? Okay, so the law is that those items that you're using for cover are items that cannot become contaminated. That is the law. They will not become contaminated. And I would like to suggest there's a deeper meaning for it. Why is it important that the items that we use as a cover cannot become contaminated? What is the symbolism of that? what is the reason behind the law? We have a law. We have a law. You have to send away the mother bird before you take the baby bird. What's the reason for that law? You have a law. You have to cover up the blood when you slaughter a bird or a non-domesticated wild animal. You have to cover the blood. What's the reason for that? You have a law. You can't slaughter the mother and the child on the same day. What's the reason for that? There are many laws, and obviously, good morning, Mr. Silverman. You have a law. You can't eat blood. What's the reason for that? We need to try to understand why, and it seems to be that there's a common thread in those mitzvot that Hashem wants us to teach us to be a certain type of people, non-cruel, certain compassionate person. We don't eat the blood of the animal. We don't just take the baby bird in front of the mother bird. We don't slaughter a mother and the child on the same day. So, it's our obligation to take lessons and to learn from mitzvot. It behooves us, if I could say. It's appropriate for us to look at mitzvot and say, what's the deeper meaning? What's it all about? Why is the mitzvah have such a, let's just like you have an etrog, right? Here we're learning Masechah Sukkah. We haven't gotten yet. We've already been learning for a while. We haven't gotten yet to the etrog and the hadasim and the ravot. What does the etrog represent? Right? The Torah says, take an etrog. So a person can go through Sukkot and he said, I fulfilled the mitzvah of etrog. I took an etrog and a lulav hadas. But what's behind the etrog? We have midrashim. The etrog is in the shape of a heart, and you have to have a pure heart, a beautiful heart, no blemishes in your heart, and that's maybe what the etrog represents. Again, the law doesn't tell us. The law just says take an etrog, and whatever the laws of what's considered kosher etrog shouldn't be grafted, right? There's certain spots might invalidate the etrog. But what's the deeper meaning? What's yes, the Torah does not give a reason for it. But there's other reasons behind it. There's depth and behind why you should take an etrog. Maybe it's also, etrog, Sukkot comes right after the holiday of Yom Kippur. And maybe Yom Kippur is the idea of what do we reach, right, Mr. Silverman, on Yom Kippur? We reach that our heart, we purify our heart. Right? What is the main thing that Hashem wants is that the heart should be good and then do great things with that heart. Hashem doesn't just want a good heart; He wants you to do action. So maybe that's
we make Hashem the king again.
Right.
We make Hashem the king again, and he says that he'll be our king. He forgave us to be our king.
Right. But now that you reach the level of a pure heart, purifying yourself, Hashem wants us maybe to keep that up. Don't go back to the world after Yom Kippur and then go back to the same grind. So maybe keep that heart pure, whatever the esrog represents the heart. So there's many symbolisms of what the hadassim represent, the eyes and the rabbis, the lips. So there are different things that they have, what they represent to teach us certain lessons in life. So that's what I want to say about the schach of a sukkah. But the schach of a sukkah, we're saying, Mr. Silverman, that it cannot become contaminated. There's a big lesson in understanding what's the symbolism of that idea. Something everyone needs to think about. Why is that law that way? That's the law. But we're trying to understand, right, Yehuda? Why did Hashem give us this type of law? Right? Why did Hashem give us the mitzvah of Brit Milah, circumcision? What's behind it? What's the idea behind it? It's a signet in your body.
Rabbi, the Brit Milah is a covenant. We have two halves, us and Hashem, and in order you have to sacrifice for that. And Hashem wants our sacrifice in order for Him to sacrifice to give us everything.
Right. But we also have to understand why the foreskin, why over there, what's it all about? What does that represent? So each mitzvah, you have to try to think. The Sefer Chinuch has a beautiful idea that the body is not complete. You have to do something on the skin. There's extra skin there. You got to cut that extra skin. which is symbolic of the human being. We are not complete. We need work to perfect ourselves as human beings, to perfect our midot, to perfect our character, how we act. The same way we have to do an act. It's a beautiful idea of the chinuch. The same way we have to go ahead and complete the physical person. We have an extra skin. We have to
Hashem made the world. Rabbi,
right?
Hashem made the world not perfect. He made it not perfect. Hashem's perfect, and he made it not perfect. He wants us to make it perfect.
And our job is to perfect ourselves, to make the human being complete, because we have weaknesses as a person. We have laziness naturally, and other things that if we don't work on ourselves, we're not going to be the right person. And that's the idea. The same way we have to perfect with our action, the body, we have to perfect the soul, perfect, so to speak, perfect ourselves in the spiritual sense. So there's meaning behind everything. And that's why I just wanted to share with everybody to think about that when it comes to the Succah. When you sit in your sukkah, when you look at the Succah and the laws behind Succah, you have to realize there's depth to it. So now back to our Mishnah. We are on 19b. I presume in the art scroll it's 19b2. Is it on 19b2? I'll take a look at it. It's 19b2. The Mishnah. Maselet kanim gedola. If you have a mat that's made from hard reeds, and that it's not easy to lay down on such a mat, and it's gedola, and the mat is large. Did not identify what's the length, what's called large, but it's large. It's clear that it's a large mat. It's not a small. The material is R-E-E-D, reeds, made out of reeds. A hard structure. It's not easy to lay down on, and therefore it's not. If it would be easy to lay down on, then it would be susceptible to contamination. But people use it to laying down. Then the Torah talks about a zav or a nidah or a zava, certain people that have contamination, that if they would lay down, something that they would use to lay down on, to sit on, would become contaminated. It's susceptible to contamination, high level contamination. It will become an avatuma.
Even a footstool.
Okay. Well, could become a father of tuma. Usually, when something is tamei, right? Let's say you have a sheret, a dead animal, and they lie, right? Animal that wasn't slaughtered. But an animal that wasn't slaughtered is tamei. The animal died. If it was slaughtered, it would remove it, that it's not susceptible, it's not contaminated, it's not tamei, it's not contaminated. But an animal that died, it's called a nevela, it died without slaughter, now that animal is contaminated. And if someone comes in contact with that animal, a person becomes contact with that animal, the person becomes a rishon l'tumah. He becomes, we'll call first level tumah. There's the dad, and then there's the son. The person who touches the dad, the av, the source, the av is the dad, the source of the contamination is the animal. So a person who comes in contact with the animal becomes a first level contamination. Now the law is a first level contamination, something that's a child. The child does not have the ability to make another person contaminated. If you are, if you receive contamination, if you're not the source of contamination, you receive a person who received contamination.
You're sheni.
No, you said the person is a rishon, and a rishon cannot make a person, make a sheni of a person or a utensil. Or rishon, only an av, correct. Only the source, something that's called an avatuma, the source of the tumah or the avatuma. The father. Right. So we say that the chair, the bed of the nidah has the status like the nidah.
He does.
That
They
the
used to dip it in the
bed,
mikveh, Rabbi. They used to
what'd
dip
you
them in
say?
the mikveh, the beds. They used to dip the
Okay.
beds in the mikveh.
Yes. But it becomes an av hatuma. That's the
Yeah, well.
chidush of midrash. That it does not go down. Good morning. It does not go down a level. It keeps the same level of the source of the tumah. That's a special now. So we say if we have a mat and the mat is made for lying down, even though it's made from material that's not easy for people to lie down. It's not common for people to lie down. But if you designated it, you made it for that purpose, so then it's susceptible to contamination. And once it's susceptible to contamination, then you can't use it for schach. I can't use this mat for schach because the mat is able to receive contamination. So that's what the Mishnah opens up. Good morning, Dr. Navid. So mafselet, so kanim gedola, if you have a mat of reeds, which is large, so asal l'shchiva, if you made the mat for the purpose of lying down, to lay down on, so then we say it's mekabelet tumah. It's susceptible. It has the ability to now become contaminated. It can receive contamination through sources that have the ability to contaminate, like an avatuma. Since it has the ability to receive contamination, you cannot use it as a covering as schach for your sukkah. But l'sichuch, if you designated this mat, the Gemara is going to have to clarify this. It was made for schach, not for a utensil type of use to use as a bed. You made the mat for a cover for the sukkah. That's not susceptible to contamination. That's not called a utensil. You could use it for schach, and it does not receive contamination. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Comes Rabbi Eliezer and he disagrees with the first opinion of the Mishnah. He says, Achat ketana va'achat gedola. It doesn't make a difference whether the mat is large or the mat is small. See, the Tanakama, the first opinion of Mishnah spoke about a large mat. A large mat, which seems to indicate that his whole discussion is about a large mat, but a small mat, there's different law for a small mat. We'll have to see what does he hold about a small mat. Generally, you would say a small mat is more made for lying down than a large mat, right? So we'll see what he holds about a small mat. But Rabbi Eliezer says it does not make a difference because it seems that the Tanakama made a distinction between a large mat, how the large mat was made. What do you look at a large? Is a large mat general, stam? If a guy makes a large mat without any specific intention for whether it's going to be used as is, you go to the store and you buy a large mat. What is a large mat made for? Is it generally used for staff, or is it generally used as covering, or is it used for lying down? So you might say a large mat is generally used for a cover, but if you designate it for lying down, then things have changed. But a small mat is generally used for lying down. That's how we could make a distinction. But let's see, Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Achat ketana, the Gemara is going to clarify all this. Achat ketanav, achat gedola. Whether the mat is large or whether the mat is small. Asal l'shchiva, if you made the mat for lying down, then it's mekabelet tumah. Since you made it for lying down, it's just to lay down on. You tended to use it you created the mat, you put together the mat, the intended use is to lie down on, then it's susceptible to contamination. The aim is and you can't use it as schach. If you made it, the intended use was for schach, for a cover. So then, if the cover is not, if it's made for a cover, that's not a utensil. A cover of a roof is not a utensil. Not a utensil, it doesn't receive contamination. It doesn't receive contamination, then you could go ahead and misach use it for. Intention is the key. That's the key. What was the intention when you made this? Now, the mats that we use today, people who use mats for the sukkah, right? People, a lot of the old days they used to use bamboo. People still use bamboo. But then I don't know how many years ago they came out with the mats. Those mats are clearly made for schach. They're not made for what? For laying down. Therefore, what? They're not mekabel tumah. They're not, so therefore that's how we could use these mats for schach. Okay, the certain hechsher, you got to make sure that they're made for that purpose. And I presume that's what the supervision, the rabbi's hechsher on the mat that you'll look when you buy a mat in the Sukkah Depot, whatever they call that store, you're going to find a certification. What is the certification doing there? What is it saying? It's not saying that it was slaughtered properly. I mean, there's no slaughtering of any mat. It's not an animal. What are they saying? They're saying most probably that the mat was made, when this mat was manufactured, it was manufactured not for a floor to lay down on, for you to lay down on this mat, right? It was made for a cover for a sukkah, and therefore you're good. Okay? Because you could say, just go to China and just, ask them if you want to buy mats from them. But the answer is, if you post the manufacturing, maybe it was manufactured for lying down. And once it's manufactured laying down, so then once already was susceptible to contamination, you can't use an item. Also, there's such a halacha, an item that was with one susceptible contamination. I think it said that you can't use that item. Just the fact that you're going to change the usage, Mr. Haber, and say, you know what, no more we're going to use it for lying down. We're going to use it only for schach. I think the halacha says that once there was susceptible contamination, you can't use it. So therefore, we need it from the beginning, from the get-go, from the day that the item was created, not to be able to susceptible to contamination. So that's what the Gemara says. It's all about. Rav Eliezer says it doesn't make a difference whether it's large or small. It's all how did you create it? How did you manufacture it? Okay, now the Gemara is going to analyze this Mishnah. Very, very beautiful Gemara. All Gemaras are beautiful. Listen to the Gemara coming up. Hagufa Kasha. The Mishnah seems that the Gemara first is going to focus on the Tanna Kama, the first opinion of the Mishnah. His statement is, we have a question in understanding his statement, because he has two statements, and each statement, the inference, reading between the lines, the inference, what you would understand, is going in two different directions. And that's what the Gemara is going to focus on right now. The Gemara says like this, Hagufa Kash. Gufa means the actual essence of what you said is problematic. Amrit, you told me in the first words of the Mishnah, Asal l'shriva, if you made the mat for lying down, mikabelet tuma. Because it was made for lying down, it's susceptible to contamination. And therefore you can't use it as schach. What's the inference? Because you made it specifically for lying down, taima da'asal l'shriva. Because you made it for lying down, that's why it's a problem. Hastama, but if you did not make, you just made the mat without any specific purpose. You didn't say whether you're using it for covering of a sukkah. You didn't say that the mat should be used for lying down. That's the question. What is the law when something is made not? You spoke before about intended purpose. The intended purpose was not, what's the law when the intended purpose was not clear? It was just made. The manufacturer made it without any specific focus. What do we say, what status do we give to something that's made not for this type of mat, that's made not for a specific focus? But the fact that you opened up and you said if it was made specifically for lying down, a large mat, it's a problem. What's the implication? If it wasn't made specifically for that purpose, it was just manufactured, it would not be for the purpose of lying down. Only when you made it for lying down, then it's a problem. But if you didn't make it for lying down, it was just made without intended specific purpose, without a focus. The manufacturer made it. The manufacturer made it. Now you want to know what status does it have? So the implication, the inference is it's made not for lying down, the average mat, the average large mat. Therefore, the average large mat is not made for lying down. You will be able to go ahead and use it for schach because it's not going to be susceptible to contamination. It's the average is made for schach. But then the Gemara says, but then the next line, the Hadatani, then the Mishnah stated, if you made it specifically intended for covering of the sukkah, then you could use it for schach. It's the ein mekabel tumah. It's not mekabel tumah. So what's the implication? Because you specifically made it for schach, you can't use it. You could use it. But if there wasn't a specific intended use of making a manufacturing of the schach, then you would not be able to use it. Taima da salasichuch, because you made it for a cover of the sukkah. Chastama, but if it was not any specific intended use, l'shchiva, it's made for lying down. So that's the Gemara's question. The opening statement of the Mishnah seems to indicate that the average large mat is made for a covering of a sukkah, and the only time a large mat will be a problem if you intended for lying down. The second line of the Mishnah.
That means it has to be made lishma.
Good morning.
For the purpose.
Yeah. I mean, lishma meaning
it
has
lishma.
to. No, but again, but the first statement is saying, the first line of the Mishnah is indicating that the average schach, the average large mat, is not made for lying down. And therefore, an average large mat, as long as it wasn't made specifically for lying down, you're good. Because the average large mat, you take a survey, and you say, what is an average large mat made for? It's made for a covering of a sukkah. It's a large. It's not a small little thing. Therefore, an average large mat you could use for a schach. You go to the store, you go to the guy without any hakshar according to that inference. You want to buy I want to buy a large mat, no problem. You could say the manufacturer makes a large mat for a cover of a sukkah, not for a lying down. That's the first line of the Mishnah. But the second line of the Mishnah stated, if he made it for schach, if he made it for a cover of a sukkah, then it is good. What does it sound like? If we go over to him, we don't know why he made it. We don't know why he made it. It's just made. They made the mat. We say it's a problem. So we're saying that second line of the Mishnah indicates a large mat. The average large mat is made also for lying down. So that's the Gemara saying. The rabbi of the Mishnah, the Tanakama, is going, the first line is indicating going one way, and the second line is indicating the opposite direction. So how do we explain the Mishnah? That is the first opinion of the Tanakama. That is what the Gemara opens up. So the Gemara answers Loholo Kasha. It's not a problem. Why not? Kan bigdola. Kan biktana. There is the case. Mr. Haber likes to use the case law and reason. The case, there is a change in the case. Because the second clause of the Mishnah is talking about a different case than the first clause. The first clause of the Mishnah is talking about a gedolah, a large mat. The average large mat is made for covering of a sukkah. Therefore, the Mishnah stated that the only time there's a problem with a large mat if you made it specifically for lying down. But the average large mat is no problem. You go to a store, I want to buy China, you go to China, you want to buy, according to that opinion, I want to buy a large mat, no problem. Because the large mat is made for schach. That's according to the first opinion. The only time there's a problem with a large mat, if they made it specifically, these are large mats that were making for sleeping, for lying down. That's the only time there's a problem. Comes the second clause of the Mishnah, is talking about a katana, a small mat. What's the average small mat made for? For a guy to lay down. Small mat, it's made for a person. Therefore, the second clause in the Mishnah says, the only time a small mat is good is when it was intended for a covering of a sukkah. The size, so far, we haven't seen yet, maybe the commentators, maybe we'll talk what's what. It seems to be whatever is understood. It seems like there's like two sizes. There's a large size mat, you like a lot of things, You want a Coke, Mr. Abe? A large or a small Coke? What do you want? They say everybody, this is understood. It's a large Coke, it's a small Coke. So you want a large mat in the industry. This is a large mat, this is a small mat. And that's what the Gemara says. The second clause of the Mishnah is saying if it's a small mat, then the average small mat is made for sitting, laying down on. And therefore, that's why the Mishnah states in the second line of the Mishnah that the only reason why the small mat is kosher, if you manufactured it specifically for a cover purposes, for a cover, not for lying down. But the average small mat is made to lie down. And therefore, the average small mat, you go into a store in China, you buy a small mat, you want to buy a small mat, you can't use it for a sukkah covering, but the average small mat is made for lying down. The only way you could buy that mat is when they manufactured it specifically. These are called shelter covers. They put on the label shelter covers, small shelter covers. So it's clear they made it for what? For a covering, not for a mat. That you can do because it was manufactured specifically for that. I'm saying so, right? As long as the same of covering, right? That's what
Rabbi.
Yes.
What about what they write in China or anywhere else is all for marketing, for selling the product. What about your own intention? You look at the product and you're like, my intention is this is perfect for Sukkah, Schach, So why is your intention for use of the material is not above what the manufacturer intention was?
Right, because once it was manufactured for lying down, so once it was susceptible to contamination at that moment, then even if later on you will somehow change.
What makes it contaminated? What makes it no one slept on it? What makes it contaminated?
What makes it is a product that was made, that was manufactured with a purpose that has the ability to contamination. Like if they made it to lie down for lying down purposes. Now at that moment that the product was completed, when they came off the line, whatever you call it, the assembly line, at that moment it had the ability to receive contamination. Now, once an item had the ability to receive contamination, you cannot use that item, even if you're going to do something to make it that's not going to be able to contaminate. You cannot use the item for schach.
And it holds even today.
That holds even today, yes. You remind
me
of
we don't have any
I saw that halach in the Shulchan Aruch that says that once something was susceptible to contamination, you can't make it, even if you maybe do something that it's not susceptible today, but once it was susceptible yesterday, remains, I don't know if it means susceptible, remains forbidden to use as schach. You can't. But
there's no contamination now. There's no contamination now. We don't.
No, there is contamination. There's no major halachic ramifications of contamination today. But there is contamination. A lady's in nidah, she has the ability to contaminate if she touches something, but there's no ramifications. She's not touching truma. There's no problem, if she touches certain things. But the problem is to use something that you use as schach, as your sukkah, Hashem wants that the item that we use as schach has no ability to become contaminated. But today, if a person goes to a funeral, they become contaminated. But there's no ramifications because I'm not going to the Beit
Got it.
HaMikdash. A Kohen can't go to a funeral today because he can't get himself contaminated.
Got it. Thank you.
I mean,
Got
that
it.
type of contamination. I mean, he could other types of contamination. A Kohen could be could handle and touch a dead animal. That's not a contamination. Torah forbids for a Kohen. Torah forbids a Kohen to come in contact with human beings, dead bodies.
Also a goy's dead body, no problem.
A Goy's dead body
There's no
also,
tumah.
right? Okay, have a great day, everybody.
Shkoyach. Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, beautiful
Thank you,
Gemara.
Rabbi.
All
Have a
Gemaras
great
are
day.
beautiful, but a lot going on, right, Mr. Silverman?
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. It's a chesed that we're here. That we
You
could learn
tell
it.
Jaime that we missed him, Michael.
I will tell them. We miss
Tell
him.
him that we missed
I
him.
will.
Thank
Thank you,
very
Rabbi.
much.
Have a great day.
Great day. You too.
Great.
Bye-bye.